go back to the basics. So yeah, we have this fantastic ministry of living in northeast Brazil, and also a lifelong commitment to South Sudan and the people of Abyei, the Dinkanot community of Abyei. So we've been 10 years in, well, this is our 11th year now in Brazil. And the first 2 years we were somewhere else, and now it's 8-9 years that we've been in Custódia, which is in the rural northeast. So it's about 5 hours from Recife. I think some of you have been to Recife and Olinda before. Yeah, it's not what you might think of Brazil, because it's much more arid. It's a semi-arid region with cacti. We work in a community that's 13 kilometers up this dirt track. And they're a Quilombola community, so they're descendants of African slaves, or those who resisted slavery. So this is a bit just to give you an impression of rural life. Yeah, I mean, every kind of oxen pulling carts and chickens running across the road and pigs. This is in the community. So we actually live in the town of Custódia, which is 25-minute drive or something like that, isn't it? 25-minute drive. And then this is where we spend a lot of time in our week. So the picture of on the left is the church, and you can kind of just see in the right-hand corner the city below it, that white below.
That is a zoomed in photo taken from the very top of the community, which is the second highest point in our state of Pernambuco. And Pernambuco is about the size of Portugal, more or less. So it's...
So the white bit is Custódia.
The white bit on the right behind it is Custódia.
And that's the church building from a distance from this hill, taking a picture of another hill. Yes, Serra da Torre community. That's not
where
really
the photo is
community,
taken from is about 1,000 meters above the city, and that's the church itself is probably like 850 or...
Yeah. You may tell me, but how long have you been involved with this community? How did you get involved with it?
8 years. And we, since we first came together to Brazil, we've been interested in Quilombola communities, partly because link between Africa and Brazil. And we had expected that after the first couple of years and me doing my language learning and getting some experience of a more mainstream Brazilian culture, that we would be moving into ministry with Quilombolas, and we were looking for a Brazilian church that we could work under that was wanting people to come and work alongside them.
It was also at the time, for those of you who've heard of Ronaldo Lidorio, who is a Brazilian missiologist and anthropologist, and he had identified the 9 most unreached people groups in Brazil, and the Quilombola communities, these descendants of those who were slaves or resisted slavery or racist oppression and ran away. So that kind of became more known about at that time, especially. And they started a group called the Pro-Quilombola Alliance, Evangelical Alliance. And so we kind of connected with them through Ali Worrell, for those of you who remember Ali, as we were starting our stride, and spent a couple of years elsewhere while Tim did language learning. And then we were able to do some vision trips around a number of, I think, 10, 15 Quilombolas at that time. And actually through Tier Fund, we connected with the leader of this community. And it turned out that he'd been invited to speak. We almost understood nothing of what he said. He had a very heavy accent, spoke really fast. Even the translator who was there couldn't understand him, so which was reassuring. And he had our pastor Neto of Betel Brasileiro, the denomination.
He was also there.
He was there,
so we met him.
And so we were then introduced to him, and he said, "You should just come and get to know this community." They'd already been visiting for a few months.
They were doing services every couple of months in the community, but didn't have the people to make it a priority. But there was an open invite from the leadership of the community. So
we were invited.
What sort of population?
In Custódia, in the town nearby, it would be 30,000 or 40,000 if you include all the little homesteads
Villages.
around. And in the community itself would be about 120 houses, so that would be like 700 people, something like that.
Yeah, it's actually spread out over a massive area, and it's 3 communities in one that went through the official government recognition process of becoming a Quilombola, because there are certain, it's like an identity, like Indigenous people, Quilombola people, and you access certain rights and benefits. So this community had already gone through that process, and they already had the land. They already acquired the right to the land, but not through that process. So that was kind of a bit of a unique story. But yeah, it's a really welcoming community, very strong family bonds and ties. You can see me holding a cashew fruit there. It's self-subsistence farmers. And the church there, we were invited to kind of lead this, form and kind of lead a team there of Brazilians from Custodia. And so we, through, them, do outreach in the community, and then started to form a church that met weekly.
So we used to meet first few years in the basically community centre there, the Residents Association, a building which no longer exists because it has been transformed into a health centre, which is something the community have been asking for 10 years. Then we were never that keen on having our own building, but it was something that the community really wanted. I think partly because in a community traditionally Catholic, having that church building is really important for people, but also as a sign that this church were committed to them, and it wasn't going to be just people who came for a few months and then left, but as a permanent show of commitment. So after a while we were praying about it, and we didn't talk to anyone, but the leader of the community said, but you should really be building a church here, and we've found someone who's willing to sell you some land at a decent price.
Yeah. There's no kind of basic sanitation there. There is electricity, and life is pretty hard for people. It's difficult to find work there. The men have to move away for parts of the year to work. Just recently, they found some more building opportunities nearby, which has been really nice to not sort of leave their family for 6 months of the year. Some of them have previously begun going to work on sugarcane fields, which is back-breaking work and very exploitative culture. And you can imagine all these men moving away for 6 months of the year and then coming back, and the kind of challenges of that. They come back, but sort of living a double life, between two places. So we're pleased that some more local workers become available recently. But there are some real challenges there, although obviously it's quite an idyllic life in some ways as well for our kids to go and play in this beautiful place and the hills, making sand and mud pies and climbing trees. They've got great friends. Their strongest friendships are there, and they've really loved in the community. Our family are really loved. Got fantastic friendships there, and so it's quite challenging but also wonderful life and childhood for them.
Brilliant. So what inspires you about the communities where you're working, and can you see any evidence of wholehearted service amongst those you're serving with?
For me, really inspired by the way the community come together and have such strong bonds and really support each other in times of hardship. Quilombola communities resisted slavery and racist oppression hundreds of years ago, but continue to have a really strong identity in community, which I think is something that challenges Western nations. And a particular example of someone who just follows God wholeheartedly is a man who came to faith a couple of years ago called Osmaldo. He just, as a mute man, we hadn't understood what was going on in his heart, and he was communicating to his family about having this fire in his heart, and it was misinterpreted as heartburn or health problems. And when we're able to understand that God had actually, his spirit was burning in his heart, that was really encouraging for us, and his passion for sharing his faith and listening to the Bible, the audio Bible nonstop, and his just love of being at church and always turning up early to set up and clear up afterwards. Wow, what an amazing faith.
We'll talk about family now. So, yeah, what encouragements does God give you to sustain you as a family?
I think when God calls individuals and couples, he has the whole family in mind. Our children love our life in Brazil. They're not little missionaries. They're not have that burden of expectation of having to fulfill a role or to be perfect or to have all the answers. But they love our life there and would be our best advocates of serving in Brazil.
I think I'd say to a family considering going, you will have challenges that you wouldn't have if you don't go, and your kids will have opportunities that they will not have if you don't go. Go with the support of others, go as part of a network, go as part of a community or family like Latin Link. Go thinking about how you can support your kids and meet those challenges that they're going to face living in another culture. But don't be afraid. God has got you. God is holding you and your family, and he wants to bless your kids as well as you.
Amen.
So tell us a bit about resources that you've created or are creating that are supporting the sort of global work of mission.
Yeah, so during the time of the pandemic, I'd started to tell my then 3-year-old stories about England, going from Brazil to England and what it would be like when we got there. And she had these wonderful questions about whether there was electricity in England and whether people slept in beds. And so we started telling stories about a little fish and how she had this experience of going to another home and comparing that and using that as a way to speak to our children about culture shock, about cross-cultural transitions. And as missionary kids, I began to see that that theme was so relevant again and again to the lives of cross-cultural kids, missionary kids, third culture kids in general, and was encouraged to write that story down and then find a way to make that available to the mission community. Using self-publishing, I was able to produce that story, and it's called A Fish Out of Water. It's available on Amazon, and it's been so encouraging to see that used around the world by missionary families. There are questions in the back about how to apply that simple story to everyday life and how to use it to prepare missionary kids to become more resilient and to think about the transitions they are facing and the realities of missionary life for missionary kids. And since then, I've had opportunities more and more to write with a life overseas and write articles, not just for missionary kids, but for third culture kids and for others, about transitions, about cross-cultural life, about some of the challenges of raising young children overseas, and just about the other resources that are available, because there are so many books and stories, information books and story and fiction books. I'm really excited about those becoming available in a multitude of languages as well, including Portuguese and Spanish for Latin Americans, to really resource the Latin American community. Yeah.
Brazil is growing as a church, and the church is growing in Brazil, and it's growing as a missionary sending country. So why should people still be thinking about going there?
Well, there are still needs in Brazil. There are still unreached people groups in Brazil that the Brazilian church has identified and would love more support in reaching. We work with quilombolas, and probably only half of the quilombola communities have an evangelical church in their community. But more than that, I would say it's just who our God is, that he loves to send people across cultures and for people to work together and under and with and alongside the local church there, and have people bringing different things from different cultures. Our God is a God who is in movement and who travels across boundaries and encourages us to do so. So I think he's always going to do that. However strong the Brazilian church is, however strong the British church is, we're going to have people moving between those cultures to serve him, because that's who he is.
Are there any specific needs where you are that people might see as an opportunity?
I think there are opportunities to, with some projects and churches, to support churches that are reaching out to migrants. Diaspora mission is an area which the Brazilian church is only just starting to take hold of. So that's something that people who have worked or would like to work with people from different cultures and refugees, there's a real need for that in Brazil. But there's also a need for people who are willing just to get stuck in with church planting and come alongside Brazilian church leaders who are often overburdened, and you may not really know everything that you're going to do beforehand, but supporting and facilitating the work of people who are in full-time ministry and feel isolated, and giving them a boost and coming alongside them in ways that you don't really know before you get there is something which is really needed and valuable.
I think there are quite a few opportunities in urban ministry as well, in poorer communities, in migrant communities within bigger cities, especially in the northeast of Brazil. And yeah, so much need. And I think prayerfully thinking about how we as Westerners can enter those spaces and what we specifically have to bring, that may be areas of that are neglected or not yet fully explored by the Brazilian church. The Brazilian church is doing a great job of sending, so enthusiastic to see that happening more and more. But there are unreached people groups or lesser reached people groups who are not yet being reached much at all. So yeah, ask the Brazil team. We've got some ideas.
You said a phrase, you used it twice in your talk about lifelong commitment. I was wondering, what difference does having that kind of perspective mean to you and to your work in mission?
God gave me a calling to a love of South Sudan, and that is a lifelong commitment to South Sudan. But it doesn't actually mean being full-time in South Sudan. In fact, I've been living in Brazil for the last 11 years, but also traveling to and supporting people remotely in South Sudan. And so we know that involvement in South Sudan, particularly the area of Abyei, will be something that is a lifelong missionary commitment. However that expresses itself, I hope for all Christians should be a lifelong thing. But it happens independently of wherever we are living at that particular time. We've already been living in 2 different places in Brazil. Maybe we'll live somewhere else in the future. But those relationships with church leaders, with community, that love of people and of the area of Abyei is something that will continue. It doesn't depend on what particular ministry we're involved in, what particular work we're doing, or where we're living at any one time.
When we got engaged, we were actually at All Nations Bible College at the time, and I remember Latin Link happened to have a conference there that same week. And so when we got engaged, we told the Britain and Ireland office leader at the time, you know, we're already on the pathway to returning to Brazil, but Tim has this love for South Sudan, and now as a couple and in the future we will work to serve in both places. And I remember his reaction of enthusiasm and delight and encouragement for something out of the box. And as that has continued to work out over these last 11 years in ministry, I think we've seen that we need to sometimes find creative ways as a family, or out of the box thinking ways, with new technology available and new opportunities. We can be creative about how we divide our time between Brazil and South Sudan. And I think mission can sometimes be reimagined in a different context and done in a different way that makes things that seemed impossible very possible.
So we work in South Sudan as well as Brazil, and we often talked about South Sudan in Brazil. We think that the Brazilian church and the South Sudanese church have loads to be able to learn from each other. We haven't yet found the best ways of bringing those connections that God has given us, but we've always believed that God wants to do something using our experiences and connections between South Sudan and Brazil. So I'd ask you to pray for that, and if you see any opportunities for those connections yourselves, then let us know. We'd love to see. Brazil is such a fantastic missionary sending country, has sent to many Portuguese speaking countries and to other parts of the world, but why not South Sudan? We would love to see that and be involved in that.
Amen.